The True History of Slavery is a harrowing tale that stretches back to ancient times, permeating various civilizations, nations, and religions. It is a dark chapter in humanity's story, with victims hailing from diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds. Slavery has entrenched itself in the fabric of societies across the world, taking on different forms and existing to varied degrees throughout history. The ancient civilizations that emerged during this period institutionalized and codified slavery. With its famous Code of Hammurabi from around 1750 BC, Mesopotamia recognized and regulated the practice as an established institution. Slavery spread across the ancient world, including regions like Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. While its prevalence diminished in Europe during the early Middle Ages, pockets of slavery persisted in certain areas. Christianity and Islam, the two dominant religions during the medieval era, coexisted alongside the trade and enslavement of both Christians and Muslims. Centuries of warfare in the Mediterranean region saw captives taken from one faith and enslaved by the other. Islamic slavery encompassed vast territories, spanning Western and Central Asia, Northern and Eastern Africa, India, and even parts of Europe, from the 7th to the 20th century. The transatlantic slave trade, which began in the 16th century, marked a particularly horrific period in the annals of slavery. European merchants, starting with Portugal, initiated this trade route by purchasing enslaved Africans from West African kingdoms. These unfortunate souls were then transported across the treacherous Atlantic Ocean to toil in the colonies of the Americas. European and American governments eventually passed legislation to abolish their nation's involvement in this heinous trade. Slavery, however, did not vanish with the end of the transatlantic slave trade. It persisted and evolved, taking on different forms in different regions of the world. Fountain Hughes was born in Charlottesville, Virginia. His grandfather belonged to Thomas Jefferson, and he himself was born into slavery. For him, there was no other life. Being a slave was all he knew. He described the dehumanizing nature of the slave trade, where people were treated as property and sold like livestock at auctions. The auction bench was a dreaded place, where slaves would learn their fate and the price that could be placed on their lives. Once sold, slaves were subject to the whims of their new masters. Living conditions were deplorable, with tattered clothes and meager rations of food. Hughes vividly recalled the absence of beds, often sleeping on the floor. Slaves had no luxury of shoes, and he didn't wear any until he was 12 or 13 years old, contrasting with today's practice of putting shoes on babies. The slave's diet was meager, consisting mainly of soups or stews made from leftover scraps from their master's meals. They had no weekends or holidays, and each day was filled with endless labor, fulfilling the needs of their masters. Slaves were expected to work tirelessly, even through the night, and expressing fatigue was met with fear and further punishment. The dread that hung over the slaves was palpable, as the smallest infraction could lead to brutal beatings. Hughes recounted witnessing the punishment of a slave woman who fought back against her master's mistress. Such acts of defiance were swiftly met with harsh retribution, reinforcing the oppressive power dynamic of slavery. With the Emancipation Proclamation, slaves were technically freed, but the reality was far from idyllic. Slavers actively withheld this information, leaving many slaves to continue working on plantations for months without their knowledge of freedom. Even after emancipation, life as a free person was a struggle, with limited resources, no money, and a lack of education. Many former slaves found themselves alone and destitute, facing starvation and hardships. Hughes revealed that he never truly felt free, as he and his mother struggled to find work and a place to call home. The transition from slavery to freedom was difficult, and many former slaves yearned for the security they had known, despite the harsh conditions. The aftermath of slavery left countless individuals in dire circumstances, and the scars of this dark period in history ran deep. The stories of former slaves like Fountain Hughes shed light on the sad truth that slavery is not a thing of the past. And that's all for today. Together, we can create a future where freedom and equality are truly universal. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more content. Let's be the change we wish to see in the world.